Hello, Gwenaelle.
Hello, Hamilton.
I'm very pleased to have you part of the webcast series we are running as part of the INSEAD Alumni Association in France in the framework of our Digital Transformation Club. Maybe a few words about you, Gwenaelle. So Gwenaelle AVICE-HUET, for those who did not have the chance to know you. Gwenaelle, you started your career in the scientific research area at French National Research Institute and the French Atomic Energy Commission on Nuclear Energy, which is quite a challenging way of starting a career in a way. Before you joining the World Bank in Washington, DC as a consultant, you also worked for the service of the Prime Minister in France within the General Secretary of European Affairs, with responsibility for energy competitiveness matters, and as the advisor of various ministers in France also as well. Which is also putting the barrier at very high level. I'm sure we are going to benefit from that. And in the course of 2010, you joined GDF Suez, now ENGIE, successively as Senior Vice President for European and Regulatory Affairs, Chief Executive Officer of ENGIE France, Renewable Energy, and as a member of the Executive Committee of ENGIE Group, responsible for the Renewables Global Business Unit and the Chief Executive Officer of ENGIE North America. So maybe this is not a surprise that you're currently based in the US. So since March 2021, you lead the corporate strategy for Schneider Electric, based in Boston, actually. And as a Senior Vice President, you also serve on the board of Air France KLM since May 2021. Very happy to have you joining, let's say, the journey that we are, let's say, establishing, talking about digital transformation. I think you know a bit about the energy industry. And especially when it comes to energy industry, of course, everybody of us, we do have in mind the fact that it is quite very much connected with the CO2 emission that we're trying to reduce so far. And this is basically the challenge that we have to run for as part of the climate change. So maybe this is where we can, let's say, imagine in terms of technologies and new, let's say, advanced type of digital ways of working and digital, let's say, means in order to, let's say, contribute to make the world a better place. So I would like to maybe have a chance, and I think that every one of us would like also that chance to hear about you, about how Schneider Electric is, let's say, leading the charge when it comes to address the new type of energy that we need for a cleaner space and a cleaner world. Over to you, Gwenaelle.
Thank you so much, Hamilton. This is indeed a great opportunity. I've been working on renewables energy for part of my career, and now I'm all about electricity and digital. And I think that it is a good connection because when it comes to climate change, a lot is coming from the energy sector first. And a lot of the response to this challenge is about reducing consumption and enabling digital within the energy sector. So I think that we are at a crossroad where everything matters, especially on energy and digital in order to solve the climate change issue that you mentioned. So I just prepared a few slides, maybe to guide a little bit the discussion. But what I would like to share is how to shape a future of the energy that would be more sustainable. There are multiple ways. There is no just one single way, but at least we have main drivers and we have a numbers of different opportunities to leverage on, especially based on electricity and on digital. That's what I would like to share with you today. So maybe to start with, I was saying that there are mega trends for which there is a pivot, a turnover, or a repositioning of people around climate change. It's all about things are moving very fast. And when it comes to climate change, we were talking about it for many years, but what we are seeing, what we're experiencing as of today is that climate change is accelerating. I've been myself to Greenland a few years ago, and what we see is absolutely impressive and extremely worrying. What happens in the past 10 years is the equivalent of what happened in the past 100 years. So you see, there is an acceleration of the momentum. And when COVID happened, we could question the level of priorities. Climate change, is it still a priority? And at the end, in the discussion with many different business leaders, political leaders, and even people like us, the conclusion is that climate change is still a very relevant topic on top of the priority. The next crisis that we have in front of us is climate change. So that's why in terms of priorities, climate change still remains a hot topic, a high priority topic. And when it comes to commitment from political leaders, from business leaders, we see that even during COVID and even after COVID, still climate change remains a hot priority for them. So that's a good point. Now, where we stand today, why are we talking about energy and climate change? Because today, mainly the main presence of CO2 emissions is coming from the energy sector. And that's why when you look at the figures, more than 80% of the world's CO2 emissions are linked in a way or another to the production and to the consumption of energy. That's why it's so important to tackle the energy issue when it comes to climate change. And the second thing that we may not have in mind is that when we consume energy, in fact, we consume a part of it. For example, the production of the energy is coming through grids, and there is a lot of energy that is lost, lost in the system. And therefore, we used to say that 60% of the energy system is lost right now, or the energy is lost right now. So it shows that there is a huge appetite, a huge opportunity to reduce consumption by reducing the losses that we have in electricity production, transmission, and distribution system. And third, post-COVID, we will see a huge growth. And that's what's happening right now. There is a rebound happening. How do we position this rebound? Do we want to have a rebound that is more sustainable than in the past, or do we let it go? And that's the kind of question that we're having right now. And when we look at stimulus plan, climate change is still a hot topic in stimulus plan. And that's an ability, a true opportunity to position the economies in a way that is more sustainable. So in order to reposition the economies and reduce CO2 consumption at the same time. So you see, this is why energy is so important right now in the debate on climate change. And especially because if you look at the past years and the years to come in terms of emissions of CO2, it has been increasing. That's normal because there was a growth evolution, and the growth evolution was accompanied by the development of fossil fuel and the consumption of fossil fuel, and therefore carbon emissions. But now we are at a kind of turning point. Where do we want to go? Do we want to go in the direction of an increase between 4 to 6 degrees Celsius? Or do we want to reduce our actual temperature by 2 degrees or even by 1.5 degrees? So we are here at a turning point, and we have to decide in which direction we want to go. If we're just letting the system as it is today, we are going to go in a direction of 4 to 6 degrees Celsius with many different consequences. You can feel some of them with extreme weather events, but this can only accelerate with sea rise, for example, an implication for people in small islands, the refugees, etc. So it can have dramatic consequences, or we could decide to have another pathway. And the other pathway would be to reduce the consumption quite dramatically in order to achieve, the 2 degrees that we're talking about, or the 1.5 degree that we are talking about. But this is a very difficult path, and we need to invest right now, and we need to decide which technology and who is able to invest and how to make it happen. So that's why this particular moment that we're talking about is so important.
That's very interesting, Gwenaelle, and I think this graphic is really much showing the urgency of the action that we need to take right now. And also, it is showing to me the kind of a radical change that we have to make in order to change the course, let's say, of the path of that, let's say, curve. And definitely the question that comes to my mind, and I guess it is the kind of a question that comes to many minds, is how do we, let's say, address that shift, that kind of a radical shift right away?
So that's a good question. I'll try to respond in the following slides, but just maybe to give you a few directions. You have two ways to reduce radically the consumption. Either you reduce the growth and you say, okay, the only possibility is to reduce the growth, or you continue to grow, but in more sustainable way. For example, you consume less energy than in the past because you are more efficient in the way they consume energy. So you let growth happen, but in a more meaningful way, in a more sustainable way. And that's the direction that we think is possible, but then it should be much more radical than today, meaning investing much more in greening the energy and at the same time reducing the consumption of energy. Otherwise, we will not make it happen.
No, that's clear. That's clear. Very clear.
And therefore, we used to say that, you know, what's happening, it's a continuation of different evolutions that we've been through in the past 250 years. It does not happen in a year. It's a continuation of revolution that we've been through. And we used to compare industry and electricity because things are very much connected. Like in 1750, we had what we call Industry 1.0. It's the rise of technology with mechanization, at the same time electrification, electricity 1.0, beginning of the electricity. And then you had mass deployment, industry 2.0, mass production, mass deployment of electrification. It was, you know, top of the story, electrification everywhere, electricity 2.0. And then in 1950, you had automation, industry 3.0. And at the same time for electricity, what it meant, green power was developing. It was a shift from just electricity to green power, new topic, and decentralization. People wanted to have electricity closer to the point of consumption. It was the beginning, 1950. And today, where do we stand? Well, it's industry 4.0, industry, Internet of Things, and at the same time, a stronger connection between electricity and digitalization. Why is that? Because it's a way to consume better, to be more performant in terms of electrification, in terms of electricity consumption. So it's at the same time consuming green with green power, and at the same time consuming better with digitalization. So you see all those revolutions are coming across together in a way that today we are at a turning point where electricity and digitalization are going hand in hand to consume more greener, and at the same time to consume better with more performance, energy efficiency. So that's all about, you know, when it comes to sustainability, defining a more sustainable world, a more resilient world, you have the two connection between electricity, making it green, and digitalization, making it smarter, better, more functioning, more performing. And that's where things are going in a direction right now. And I think that's by comparison, in response to the question that you were addressing earlier, it's where we can make a difference. But we need to invest massively in first greening the electricity, deploying more electricity, but greening the electricity. And on the other hand, deploying more digitalization, more digital, especially in the electricity sector. And innovation right now, it's all about the connection between the two. When you look at different applications, EV charging, for example, or EV, electrical vehicle, it's all about electrification and digitalization. And it will have some huge impact on both areas. So you see, there are numbers of elements. For example, home automation. You're at your home, at a residential home, you want to connect numbers of different objects in the home in order to better perform your home yourself, because you want to control everything in your home, but at the same time to reduce your consumption and therefore to reduce your CO2 footprint. So you see, everything is connected. Again, it's electrification and digitalization. It can be a home, it can be, you know, EV charging, it can be numbers of different usages, but innovation right now is tackling the two all together. And therefore, when it comes to technology for the 20th century or the century to come, it's all about that. It's on one side, turning out from fossil fuel into the new technologies, and still there is a long way to go because we are still consuming a lot of fossil fuel. But what is the most important thing is to make the investment in order to transition as fast as possible into the new energy sector, into renewables, into new technologies like batteries, like hydrogen, like numbers of new technologies that would enable the future to be greener. And second, when you look at electrical distribution, still now you have numbers of electrical distribution that are non-connected. So we cannot play with them. We cannot make them more efficient. And therefore, you see, there is still a long way to go in order to invest on the production side, on the transmission side, and on the distribution side in order to enable those usages that you envisage, the usages of the future combining electricity and digitalization. And therefore, when you look at the whole value chain or the value train, innovation is across the whole value chain. From generation is power production. We need to have more wind farms, solar farm, offshore, biomass, all those kind of investment from the generation point of view. And we are very fortunate because the cost of these technologies have decreased so dramatically. Now it's affordable. It's not only accessible, it's also affordable. And question is to have resilient power production. And therefore you need to combine different technologies. There is now one single solution. We need to combine different technologies from offshore, solar, batteries, hydrogen, everything all together in order to have something that is resilient enough. And second, we need to invest in transmission and distribution. As I said before, we are losing also some energy today. There is a lot of wasted energy. So we need to make sure that we have the optimal system in order to capture the maximum energy and to invest in these lines in order to enable the electrification, as we mentioned before. And finally, we need to deploy more usages in the industry, in the infrastructure, in the power sector, or in the building sector. For example, smart building management in order to optimize everything in a single building. So you see, we have innovation that is starting to deploy across the different value train, and it's just a beginning. There is just more to come. Because with digital, the possible is just infinite. With AI, Internet of Things, I mean, everything is just the beginning. But that's what's exciting about what's happening right now. And that's why when we were talking about the curve and flattening the curve for the increase of the temperature, we should be excited by this journey because it's up to us to invest in this transition. And I will give you just maybe a few examples because people may think this is far away. Technology is not really available. Yes, it is available. It's just a matter of how to scale it up faster, how to make sure that people understand that this is available for the different sectors, for the different usages, and how to deploy faster in the different geographies. For example, electrification of our usages. We have the cars and more EV are deploying right now. When you look at numbers of car manufacturers, they are investing so dramatically in EV cars. But now we need to have the grid and we need to have the electricity to power those cars. So just as an example, another example is power production, as I mentioned before, from fossil fuel into renewables. And right now there is so much investment and capital is so much available for power production. That's impressive. And it was not the case a few years ago because, again, it was so expensive. And right now it's affordable. And again, electrical distribution. What I mentioned before is that mainly most of the electrical distribution were not connected. Now more and more, everything is connected. So you have connected products, you have edge control, and then you can have applications, then you can have AI, then you can have predictive maintenance and things like that. It was not possible 2 years ago again, and connected products open new doors of opportunity. So it's just also a matter of transitioning from products that were using some gases that were extremely nocive for the atmosphere, for example, SFC's gas, and we transition towards new products without this kind of gas. And this is available right now. And we're not the only one doing that. So that's why we need to believe in those new products in order to curb, again, the temperature rise. Just to show you that this is concrete. This is not just a fantasy, or this is not just an idea that we have. This is something concrete. The question, again, is the path, is the rhythm, how to do faster. But again, when you look at the legacy, everything was centralized. Everything, was a mix of fossil fuels kind of technologies, and without digital. And the future is much more decentralized, much more digitalized, and much more electric, basically. And so when you look at electricity 4.0, which is the new revolution that we are building right now, that is an enabler to turn the curve down. It's everything relying to about grid of the future, to have a better performing grid. Homes of the future, home automation at your home, better consumed, to be more resilient, to be more performing in consumption in houses. It's building management, it's data centers, it's the industries of the future, it's infrastructure of the futures. All the products that I mentioned before, all the systems, services, software that I mentioned before, are enabling this transition to happen in those different segments. And that's what's exciting. This is, again, not a fantasy. This is something concrete that can happen in all those different segments. And that's why the core of our innovation at Schneider Electric is a mix of electric and digital. So our strategy is quite simple. In fact, it's innovation, is software, and software meaning we connect all the different products. We capture all the data, and with all the data, we produce applications, analytics, we produce AI in order to better perform, to do predictive maintenance and those kind of tools. Again, the objective is always to be smarter with the system. And the objective at the end is to have an end-to-end life cycle. Again, from design, build, operate, and maintain for our different applications across a different segment, leveraging on artificial intelligence. So you see, it's all about how for a given customer deploy very concrete products, enabling them to be connected and enabling them to better perform thanks to artificial intelligence. And I maybe give you just a few examples. One example that I mentioned is the innovation that we've been deploying that is greener without SF6, the gas that I was mentioning before. It's the design, the electrical system, and the digitalization of our new products, including connected products and digitalization of those products like the switchboard that we're deploying. But it's also throughout the value chain for the given segment. For example, in the design, build, operate, and maintenance, having all the digital tool to accompany a given client. And that's extremely important because when you build a new factory, you need to make sure that design is well established and you can have a digital twin, for example, to do that. Then it's to have this continuity with the build and operate and maintenance, just to make sure that we operate in the right way and better perform in terms of operation and maintenance. So I would say it's across the value chain for a given segment, proposing CO2 emission reduction, proposing reduction of the cost, better efficiency, etc., and everything is powered by artificial intelligence. And that's why today, right now, we are, very well recognized in the different numbers of sectors for these particular applications that we are deploying, mixing electrical and digital for all the segments. And just maybe one of them to give you a sense of what it means. Marina Bay Sands, it's an hotel in Singapore. What we've been deploying is that we implemented connected products on site, so electrical products, but connected in a way that we can capture all the data as real time on the functioning of the hotel. And then you have a layer of edge control where you can analyze, you can visualize everything that is happening in the building. And then you have the application, the services, where you can optimize the consumption in the building. So it's 3 layers: connected, edge control, application, and analytics. For what? In order to reduce carbon emission. And therefore, for this particular hotel, we enable to reduce carbon footprint by 34%. So you see, it's everything about products, system, services, together with software and AI. Just to give you an example, but I could give you more, it's just to give a sense that when it comes to reducing the curves, it's concrete. It's something that is available right now. We just need to deploy faster.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gwenaelle. It was very, let's say, comprehensive and clear. And I think that the challenges that we face so far is very quite self-explanatory now. And few questions comes to mind. First, we do understand that we need to flatten the curve. It is very clear. There is an urgency to do that. We need to have a kind of a radical change, which, let's say, is a kind of a challenge that we need to embrace and that are very, very tough as a challenge, because we know that radical change, it is not that easy to make. So my first question for you, Gwenaelle, is how it is possible to make that change faster? Meaning that we know in our big companies, we do have strategies and we strategize for something that will happen for years, right? Like 3, 5, and sometimes 8 years. How it is possible, I mean, if we close our eyes and we just imagine that now we need to do it, I mean, no matter what does it take to go more faster in order to flatten the curve, at least, based on the contribution that you can bring, let's say, at Schneider Electric?
So first, I think it's a question of mindset. I think that we should all bear in mind that this is top priority and we have to work all together in the same direction. For example, investors have more and more requirements regarding sustainability standards, and that's positive. The more we are helping or going in that direction, the better it is. So first, it's the mindset to deploy more globally, more largely across the sector, across the different activities, just to make sure that business leaders understand that customers, investors, they require more and more sustainability standard on the value chain, on the supply chain. And if we are not moving ahead, I mean, we will be left behind. So I think that the first element is mindset. The second element for me, it's transparency. I mean, we need to communicate regularly on where we stand, because at the end of the day, it's not a question of lying. We need to know where we stand in order to better perform, to better reduce our own footprint. And therefore, everybody should leverage on digital to have access to those data and understand where they stand and understand what are their options to decarbonize or to reduce their footprint. And today it's a bit chicken and egg. We are talking about climate change, but communicating on everybody's own impact, it's not always easy. At Schneider Electric, we wanted to have this kind of commitment and to communicate like very regularly towards investors on where we stand on our own carbon emissions. And I think the second element, yes, it's transparency. And maybe the last one is about education. I think that I talked a lot about energy, but the more I think about it, the more I think it's much broader. It's also reducing waste and therefore emissions, but waste in general. And I think that we need to invest much more in education to make sure that we prepare for the next generation, even though they're already very much committed. But we need to make sure that everybody at every level in any organization have a role to play in this evolution of the world. And therefore, for me, it's a combination of mindset, transparency, education. And at the end, it's leadership, because transforming a company that used to do something in another area to shift around the positioning of company, it's never easy. It requires lots of courage. And I've experienced that in my past company. And I think it's where you can differentiate as a leader.
Yes, definitely. My second question, Gwenaelle, for you is, let's say, related to what you was framing about. And I love that framing, actually. Let's say the combination between digital and to be smarter when it comes to using the energies, etc. And the greener type of aspect, which means that, okay, we of course need to have a kind of input when it comes to energy that is green. And so the combination of the two, let's say, create that kind of a virtual cycle. And it made me think about, we talked about a lot, about AI, artificial intelligence, etc. It made me think about EI, a kind of electrical intelligence. And it made me think about, okay, so but what does it mean to have a system, a building, an infrastructure that is electrical intelligence or electrically intelligence? This is, to me, not that kind of obvious question in a way, because sometimes we have blind spots and we don't know what we don't know, of course. And so we don't know exactly what does it mean to have electrical intelligence part of what we use and, let's say, the infrastructure that we, let's say, manage, etc., etc. Is there any point of view at Schneider Electric about, yes, we need to maybe define a kind of a standard when it comes to EI, and this is what it means for us, and this is the way forward to, let's say, democratize a kind of a thinking, as you say, mindset, but also a kind of a, let's say, technologies in a way that will really much combine the both as one to build an electrical intelligence type of infrastructure system or whatsoever that we use in the society.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So I would say we need to combine three different levels of technology. The first level being deploying smart measures, monitoring tools in order to have this kind of data and understand what's consumed from what sources and all that. So it starts by the basics, collecting data, understanding consumption, understanding what's happening in the building, where we are losing energy and what are the sources that we're using. So I think this is the first level of technology, deploying smart meters and monitoring tools. The second level would be, to control and to leverage on technologies in order to control a little bit more the electricity produced or consumed in a given building or in a given segment. We have, for example, a kind of tool which is called building management system, when you can actively choose what source of electricity you use, or actively choose, depending on what's available on the market, if you consume or if you use your own energy from a solar rooftop or from a battery, etc. So you can, in a dynamic way, decide your impact on the carbon footprint. And third, it's the third level of technology would be everything related to optimization. It's one step further. It's investing in AI, for example, to, again, as you were saying, to anticipate what could be the grid of the future, what could be the impact of, an evolution of your products on site. It's predictive maintenance, anticipating everything that could happen. So I would say you have three different levels. The first one being just collecting data and visualization of what you consume. The second one would be just optimizing, controlling everything. And the third one would be a step further, much more related to AI. But all in all, I would say the best energy is the one that you do not consume, because you are better performing. You are doing what we call energy efficiency, because you're controlling so well the system inside the building, you can reduce as much as possible the energy that you consume. And we've seen also numbers of requirements from customers saying, I'm not at ease with the grid. Sometimes it's unreliable. You've seen what happened, for example, in California or in Texas, etc. So I'm not really, I'm a bit worried about what's happening on the grid. I want to be more autonomous. I want to reduce my carbon footprint, but I want to be affordable. So we've seen numbers of requirements like that. In that case, what we designed, it's what we call a microgrid. Microgrid meaning we deploy on site in a given client area, batteries with solar, so numbers of tools like that to produce, to store energy on site, So it's really decentralized mean of production and storing energy. And at the same time, with all the digital tools that I mentioned, connected products, edge control, and then the software, in order to optimize real time, the consumption, the production on site for the given client. And they can visualize directly on their software, on their computer, what's happening. And they can decide if they want to take electricity from the grid or electricity from their own microgrid. And everything is then collected and explained in terms of carbon emission reduction. So that's very educational, I think. And at the same time, it's combining numbers of requirements to have electricity more reliable, more affordable, and more sustainable.
Clear, very clear. Do you think that maybe the role of the regulations, what does it take? What does it mean? Actually, I think that, of course, even though as Schneider Electric, you really have a kind of a big ambitions to, let's say, flat that curve, it also takes some kind of a new norm, maybe some kind of a new regulation to, let's say, facilitate at the state level some of the change, let's say, happening. What is your thought about this?
So I would say you're absolutely right. There is a connection between what's the industry sector is doing and what's the political leaders are doing, because there is this joint momentum, and that's positive. Now, the way it's deployed can be very different from a geography to another one. For example, in Europe, you have the European Commission defining some rules across the different countries, like on renewables, achieving certain percentage of renewable production in the different geographies in the different countries. Or you have the Fit for 50 that was presented a few weeks ago. So for energy efficiency, especially. In the United States, it's very much different. You have the state on one side, you have the federal on the other side, but things are happening in any case, but in a different way, in a different applications. What matters is that there is a connection between what the political leaders want to achieve and at the same time what the industry is doing. And I think the more the political leaders can encourage those developments, the better it is. For example, in renewables, if at the beginning there was no strong incentives in favor of renewables, we would not be where we are today, because solar was so much expensive, because wind was so much expensive. The big investment, the big incentives from the political leaders enable the development of those technologies. And now here we are, it's very affordable. So I think to have this momentum in the same direction than the one the industry is moving ahead, that's extremely positive. On energy efficiency, regulation also matters in order to encourage the new technology deployment. And I think that people understand more and more that energy efficiency is something quite easily achievable. It's just a matter of understanding what it means in terms of investment and in terms of technology.
Very clear. I'm thinking about the new generation, Gwenaelle. You was mentioning during your presentation that we think that they are quite very much aware about those, let's say challenges and the importance of the climate change, actually, at least compared to us in a way. And what is, from your perspective, what is, let's say, the change that you foresee as part of the way the new generation are going to consume energy and are going to, let's say, take, let's say, their part in that challenges? Is it something that you see as a kind of a change, and what is it exactly? I mean,
what we've seen is that companies that are very much involved or committed to sustainability have received more applications than others. And especially when in my previous company, we were doing not so many renewables in the past. We were a big electricity production producer, but doing lots of different technologies. And the way we positioned the company into renewables and energy efficiency, suddenly we received so many more applications from the young generation, from the young talent. And in Schneider Electric, we see a lot of appetite, especially since we've been nominated the most sustainable company of the year. It was this year. We were nominated the most sustainability company of the world for this year. And since then, we received so many applications because the young generation is willing to work for companies that has a mission, that has a purpose, and in order to reconcile their own belief with what they are doing at work. And I think that makes totally sense because we are spending so much time at work. It's so much important to do something that is meaningful, that is reconciling your own opinion with what you're doing. So I think that this is the first element, and this is showed concretely in the numbers of applications that we receive. And second, the young generation is also looking for the right culture in the companies. And culture is not only about sustainability commitment, it's also the way you're working in a company. And I think Schneider Electric is a very good example where empowerment is extremely important, where diversity and inclusion is extremely important. And for the young generation, also having a possibility to reconcile personal life and professional life is something that matters, especially with COVID. We've not spent so much time in the offices, and therefore, it changed the way we used to work. And I think that the young generation is expecting that from the companies that are joining. And therefore, for me, it's all about sustainability, but also designing the right culture, to respond to these new requirements or this envy from the young generation. And there is a talent war, especially for electronics, especially for AI, and all about energy transition, because everybody wants to go in that direction. So we need to be extremely engaged or committed towards this new culture, enabling empowerment, enabling diversity across organization, and enabling to have the right balance between personal life and professional lives.
Well, yes, very much, let's say, aligned with that, Gwenaelle. Thank you very much for this few words. And I guess that it goes directly to the hearts of all those new generation that are waiting for that change to come. Thank you very much for this presentation and this highlight about the new, let's say, challenges that we have to address when it comes to energies, that is either, let's say, smart and green. We, of course, stay tuned to see how Schneider Electric is going to contribute and help to win that, let's say, new challenges of the time. Thank you very much again, Gwenaelle. Bye.
Thank you, Hamilton.
Bye-bye.